This happened when I was about 8. For reference, I'm female. I grew up in an apartment complex with about 20 buildings, each around 25 floors high. Each floor had 4 apartments, which made about 2,000 apartments overall. Each building had a car park underneath, with an elevator and a flight of stairs that went from the car park to the roof. My apartment was on the 5th floor of an apartment building right in the middle of the complex. I used to take the bus home from school, and it would drop me off at the corner across from the complex. I'd cross the road and walk home. One day, I had gotten off the bus and crossed the road when I saw that some neighborhood kids had drawn a hopscotch on the footpath outside the complex. I loved hopscotch, so I dropped my bag and started playing. On my second go, a lady, she looked to be in her mid-20s, came over and asked if she could play too. I was a naturally shy girl, but I was also very polite, especially to adults. I gave her my stone and let her have a go. Once she'd had a go, she asked if her friends could play. 3 guys, all in their mid to late 20s, came over. This freaked me out. As I said, I was very shy, especially of males. I was aware that I was alone with them, and I felt very uncomfortable. I told the lady that they could play, but I had to go home. She gave me a sad look and said that she hoped we could be friends. I didn't want to hurt her feelings, but I was pretty scared, so I lied and I told her I would take my school bag home and come right back. I picked up my bag and hightailed it out of there. I got home and thought that would be the end of it. I was scared of getting in trouble from my parents for talking to strangers, so I didn't tell them. The next day, though, the lady was waiting for me at the gates of the complex. She said that she was very sad that I hadn't come back, and that I had hurt her feelings. I said that I was sorry, but that my mom had made me do my homework. She asked if we could play now. I looked around and saw her friends waiting by a van. She said that they wanted to take me to have ice cream at Kiki's. Kiki's was a new ice cream place that had just opened. Each ice cream came with a toy, and all my friends at school had at least 2 toys each. We couldn't afford to go there, so I'd always felt left out. Now, this lady was offering to take me. I knew that I shouldn't go with her, so I said thank you, but that I couldn't play today. She got really angry and said that I had to go with her. Being a timid kid, I hated being yelled at, so this freaked me right out and I started to cry. The lady almost immediately backpedaled and said she was sorry and gave me a hug. Then she tried to lead me to the van, saying an ice cream would make it all better. I pulled away and started to run home, but this time, they followed me. I could hear them running after me, and I knew they were faster than me, so I figured I had to hide from them. I flew into the underground car park of the building closest to the gate and hid between 2 cars. I heard them run down the ramp and stop, and then I heard the lady call out to me. "Do you like hide and seek? Let's play. Ready? We're coming to get you." I was shivering violently and knew that they'd find me here. I decided I'd get to the elevator shaft, take the elevator up to the top, then run down the stairs a few floors and take it back down, thinking that they'd see the elevator stop on the top floor and assume I was hiding there. The elevator was on the other side of the car park. I had to go around 2 corners to get there. I crept along the wall, staying as low as I could until I was around the corner. Then I bolted for the elevator. The elevator was in a small room that had a huge door. I got inside but didn't get to close the door all the way. I pressed the up button and watched as the elevator slowly descended, stopping at nearly every floor. I crept over to the door and peeked out through the crack to see where they were. I spotted them just as I heard the elevator bing from behind me. Without thinking, I closed the door. Now, as I said before, the door was huge, so it made a huge noise as it closed, and even as I ran into the elevator, I knew they'd know where I was. The elevator was full of people, so I squeezed right to the back, hiding between two boys and a girl who I'd seen around before. The girl lived in my building but on a different floor. I watched the elevator doors closing, praying that they would hurry up. Just before they closed, a hand shot between them, and they opened again. The woman was there, looking furious. "Get out here," she yelled. An elderly woman asked what the matter was, and the woman said that I was her daughter and I'd run away. I was too scared to speak, as the woman grabbed my arm and tried to drag me out. One of the boys sensed something was wrong, though, and stopped her. He asked if I knew her, and I shook my head and started to cry. The girl from my building picked me up, while the boy told the woman to leave me alone. Since the elevator was full of people who now realized what was happening, the woman and the guys disappeared. The girl from my building and the two guys walked me home and told my parents what had happened. The police were called, and after some investigating, I wasn't told this until years later, found that the women and men were child traffickers. I'm so grateful that that boy realized something was off and stepped in. Who knows where I'd be if he hadn't. A few years back, my husband and I were living in an apartment in Brooklyn. One night, we decided to check out our neighborhood sex offender registry, and we discovered an offender lived in our building. Not a big deal to us, as we don't have any children at the time, but I should mention that this guy was one creepy-looking dude. I'm talking about the wild hair, crazy eyes, creeper type of scary. We would see the guy walking around the building or our neighborhood every now and then. He even set up a fruit stand for a while, and would wildly yell at people as they passed by. He never bothered us, so we mostly didn't think about him. At the time, I was working a crazy job, where I would be at work really late every night and have to take a taxi home. On those nights, my husband would stay up late and wait for me to get back. I was also a bit brain dead when I would get home after a 20-hour shift, so sometimes it would take me a while to find my keys, and my husband would have to let me in. One night, I had texted that I was leaving the office around 3 a.m. About half an hour later, my husband heard our door handle jingling. Assuming that it was me, he got up and went to let me in. However, something made him look out the peephole first, and there he saw him, the sex offender, completely naked, standing outside our door. As soon as my husband looked out, the guy stopped jiggling the handle, looked up, and put his eyeball right up to the peephole, trying to look in, as if he could tell someone was looking out at him. Then for some reason, my husband opened the door. As soon as he did this, the guy tried to force himself into the apartment. Eventually, my husband got the door closed and called me. I was about a mile away from our building when I got the call, and I was terrified. It must have been obvious, because when we got to our building, the taxi driver asked if he could walk me to the front door. I told him yes, and then I would appreciate that, and he stood with me until my husband came outside to walk me in. We lived on the 6th floor, and from the moment we walked in, you could hear someone running up and down the staircase. We ran to the elevator and jumped in, pressing the door close button over and over until the elevator finally started to move. When we got to about the 3rd floor, the floor where the sex offender was at the time, he began banging on the elevator doors trying to get in, and then we heard him go to the staircase and start running up the stairs to catch us. When we got to our apartment, I called the cops to report the terrifying situation. It took them 2 hours to arrive, and by that time the guy had already picked up his clothes and gone home. The cops didn't even come inside the building. They made us go outside and didn't even get out of their car. When I explained what happened, they responded by saying, "You live in Brooklyn, get used to it." Eventually, we moved out of the building, but whenever we go back to that neighborhood, we still see the guy at his fruit stand, yelling at people walking by. This story happened to me when I was about 7 years old. We lived in a relatively big town in Russia. Towns, unlike villages, are known for their tall multiple apartment buildings, which I wouldn't dare call skyscrapers, but some of them have been known to go up to the 24th floor. Ours, for example, had 9 stories, and our apartment was on the 8th floor. Another detail that you need to know is that each floor had 4 apartments, 2 on each side, separated by the staircase. This separation left room for a little hallway. Some people would claim them for theirs and install a door right at the beginning of this new hallway to have extra protection for the 2 apartments on the side. Our apartment had that little extra hallway, and the door installed was wooden and old. When we first moved in, we were curious to see who our neighbors in the apartment directly to the left were. Turned out it was a family of 3, a mother and her 2 sons in their late 20s. She worked a lot to provide for her sons, who seemed very healthy at first. Tall, lean, and talkative, although I couldn't really grasp the whole idea of addiction or drugs in general. I remember being repulsed after finding out that we lived right next to heroin junkies. They were harmless since their mother provided enough to get them what they needed, but I do remember stories of them stealing on occasion or climbing into their apartment down from the roof whenever they forgot to take their keys. One day, I overheard a conversation that their mother wouldn't be able to make enough money anymore, so the whole family was looking for a cheaper place to stay. I can still make out this woman's facial features. She always looked so tired and sad, but still tried to smile when she saw me. Although we did not initially agree, our grandma moved into the empty apartment a couple of months later, and I started to like it more, being able to just step out of our apartment and go straight to hers. The wooden hallway door protected us from the stairway, and provided a sense of having a huge family in a huge house, even though I was the only child at the time. My parents were pretty busy people. My mom had a business and my dad was an engineer. My grandma had already retired, but she had a good piece of land out in the village that she used for gardening, so she too was very busy to keep her crops alive, and therefore spent a lot of time away. Although I was little, I was raised to be responsible and aware. I hate stereotypes, but when it comes to crime in Russia, I must admit that a lot of them are true. The idea of having a babysitter was not widely spread until the 2000s or maybe later, so whenever my parents had to leave the house, I would have to take care of myself. Sometimes I would go and visit Grandma, but when she was gone too, let's just say I didn't complain. I would watch cartoons and talk on the phone a lot, and eat jam straight out of the jar. This day was one of those days. I turned the TV on and my private little party started. As always, I turned up the volume and attempted to sing along and dance to the music. I was all by myself and enjoying the hell out of it, until I was startled by a loud sound. The typical sound the door to my grandma's apartment made, because it was a bit old but modified from outside with some kind of a leather cushion. It provided a little more isolation, but it also made it more difficult to open or close the door. You had to pull really hard and also slam it shut. I felt a little embarrassed for my loud, goofy singing, so I turned off the TV and went to see if my grandma was already home from her garden. I knocked on her door, but I heard nothing. "Grandma?" I asked, loud so that she'd hear me coming. Nothing. I grabbed the keys for her door and opened it. "Grandma, are you home?" Even though I had a feeling that she was not home, a strange sensation crept through my body. I was completely sure that I'd heard the door slam, but nobody was there. I looked around and didn't see anything out of the ordinary, so I tried my best to shrug it off as me being mistaken and went back inside our apartment to continue to sing. A couple of minutes later, I heard it again. Trying not to freak out, I turned off the TV once again and went to see if Grandma was there this time. Maybe she'd left very quickly because she forgot something and now she had actually returned. I know that's pretty stupid, but I had to calm myself down somehow. Again, nothing. She wasn't at home. I went inside again and made sure to turn our lock 3 extra times. The entrance door was wooden and kind of so-so, but the lock on it was new and had steel pipes going deep into the wall to the left, up and down. I was waiting for the 3rd time. My heart was pounding, and I could hear it beating in our quiet apartment. I was terrified because I knew that somebody was trying to mess with me. I couldn't figure out how they made the noise and who was out there, but I knew that they wanted to get inside. I heard it again, a little more quiet this time, but still loud. Terrified to even look out the peephole, I looked at our hallway once I managed to catch my breath. Still nothing. A couple of seconds after that, I gathered the courage to slightly open our door and look outside. Just like I saw through the peephole, everything was fine with the hallway. Everything was fine with our door, my grandma's door, our hallway door too. But then I looked a little closer. One of the locks on the hallway door was hanging down from the only screw left. The other, smaller one, had fallen down to the floor and the steel latch was bent. I don't know how I didn't pee myself, seriously. I ran to the door with broken locks and tried to secure it somehow. A couple of seconds later, I realized that I couldn't do anything about it, so I ran inside and locked the door. Even though I was taught to call the police in case of an emergency, I called my friend from the same building first, hoping that her father would be there. He was. Crying and sobbing, I explained my situation the best I could, and he showed up immediately. His presence seemed to have scared whoever it was away, and I felt relieved. The locks had been destroyed, and so was our hallway door. Large enough pieces were ripped from it that it made it almost impossible to repair. Later that day, we called a door company and ordered the installation of a heavy iron door. You remember me telling you about our former neighbors? Well, apparently, the family was doing worse and worse financially, so those junkies became regular visitors at police stations for theft and other minor crimes. This time, one of them must have remembered where they used to live, so we thought that it would be easy to break in since the door in the hallway would eventually give way. I can't believe those were the same people who had acted so friendly and seemed so harmless. The man was eventually caught, but I never quite got rid of the fear of being alone in a place somebody tries to break into. I have occasional nightmares that portray exactly that. What's up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just want to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end. If you guys liked the video, please feel free to leave a comment below, or perhaps like, share, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you guys have a personal story you'd like to submit to me, you can go ahead and take a look in the description. There will be links to my social media, including my Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. You can go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to include your story in a video as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please feel free to include in the tagline what the story is about if it has a theme, and how you like to be credited in the description of the video that your story is used in. If anybody is curious about the music is always listed in the description in the order which it appears in the video. I'll also have names of the tracks and links to the artists I used, so if you're curious about the music, go check in the description, it's always down there. Last but not least, if you guys have any constructive criticism, please feel free to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.